The South African Medical Association says doctors have to pay special attention to the survivors to avoid bacterial infections. That's as the victims can lose the protective barriers on their severely burnt bodies. For more on the story, we're joined this morning by the association's chairperson, Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa, joins us via our video link this morning. Doc, it's great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on. This story just continues to leave us all aghast at just the extent of the injuries suffered by these victims. Doc, give us a sense of what the first steps would be to try and save lives in an incident like this.
Good morning to you, Michelle, and to your viewers, and thanks for having me in your program. First of all, Michelle, if you could just allow me to, on behalf of the South African Medical Association, pass our deepest condolences to the families and the healthcare workers who lost their loved ones and their colleagues. And we hope that the Almighty God will give them strength throughout this period. Obviously, coming back to your question, is the issue of, when patients come in, or what would be the first thing to do. You will understand that this patient would come in different degrees of injury. So they will be attended to differently, and their triage or their how you attend to them speedily depends on who is injured in what degree. So you'd start with those who we call them red coat, those that really they can't wait. So in most cases, if you have a burn patient, you are worried about the airways, because before you know it, they tend to inhale smoke and fire and everything else into their system. So when that happens, there is swelling of the airways and everything else. And before you know it, if you're not quick enough, you might find the airways closing before you even put a pipe. So in most cases, depending on the levels of burns, you'll have to attend to the airways of the, if it means putting up a pipe, even when the patient is still breathing, not to prevent a closure of the airways, that's what you do. So you take good care of the airways, but you also need to know these patients, they've lost lots of fluids. So you need to make sure that you are resuscitating these patients with fluids, many drips, not just one drip, many drips around, and making sure that, the patient is having enough fluids in the system. Yeah. But the other part that comes in is the issue of infections, because you understand that these patients have lost the physical barrier, and they are now going to have any part coming in their system. So you need to make sure that you protect them from that. So it's a multidisciplinary approach. Not one doctor can handle these patients.
Yeah, absolutely, Doc. I mean, you talk about the issue of infection being such a serious concern, particularly with burn victims when it's burns to this extent. When we have multiple patients, as is the case resulting from this Boksburg blast, do we have the capacity in our hospitals, in our public hospitals, to do what needs to be done to keep them safe?
We do not have enough capacity at our hospitals in terms of the infrastructure and also the personnel, health personnel on the ground. There's a shortage of specialists, shortage of doctors. Hence, we made a call for our colleagues, even from the private sector, to go and assist, those colleagues who are managing these patients. Because you can imagine, just one patient requires a lot of specialists to attend to that. Surgeons, plastic surgeons, anesthetists, psychologists, would need a nutritionist, dietitians, infection control specialists. So everyone needs to be on board, to manage these patients.
Yeah. I mean, that's disheartening, Doc, because what that ultimately means is that there could be further loss of life just as a result of our lack of capacity.
That's correct. There could be loss of lives because, if you have a shortage of nurses, for example, in the ICU, each patient needs to be monitored closely, and if you can't control the infection around there, and also allowing anyone else to come in and out of those spaces. You could expose that patient to infections. But it is very critical, as we always say it, that the healthcare system, must be beefed up in terms of healthcare personnel. Yeah. Because in times like this, that's when you save lives. But you cannot save lives if you have got very few healthcare personnel on the ground, to take good care of these patients.
Yeah. I mean, Doc, we've seen the videos doing the rounds on social media. We've seen some of the footage of those injured people just in the aftermath of that blast in Boksburg. Give us a sense from what you know, Dr. Mzukwa, the level of pain and anguish, because a burn injury is just something else, isn't it?
Sure. Yes. I cannot get to describe the amount of pain that those patients are feeling or, are undergoing at this point in time. Hence, the consumption of, material pain management is a greater part of management of these patients. You need to rope in people like the anesthetist, to advise on what painkillers would be relevant for these patients. It's very critical that, when the patient is being attended to, whether you are doing a dressing or this patient is just lying there, it's not only when you're touching the patient, they feel the pain even if you're not touching them. So you need to make sure that this patient, as part of a greater management of this patient, is pain management. They must not feel pain. They must be well controlled when it comes to pain.
Yeah. Another opportunity for our healthcare system to introspect, Dr. Mzukwa, about our lack of capacity, about, as you mentioned to us at the start of our interview, that specialist knowledge in various areas in terms of medicine. In this instance, we're talking about burns.
Yes. For example, if you think about wound care specialists, we do not have enough in the country. Burn specialists don't have enough in the country.
All right, we do apologize. We seem to have lost our connection there to Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa, who's the chairperson of the SA Medical Association, just giving us a sense of the gaps and where they lie insofar as what happens now for the victims of that bomb blast that happened in Boksburg now just a few days ago. If you can still hear us, Dr. Mzukwa, let us thank you for your time this morning. Thank you indeed for giving us that interesting perspective